Hi everyone, I'm Luke Hector and you're watching The Broken Meeple, a show where I rave and rant about board games, but usually more the latter.
Pleasure to be meeting you. Quite a pleasure.
Oh yeah, we're doing it. We're doing Arcs, the most trending game of this year so far. And before we even get started, this is not a sponsored review in any way, shape or form. I bought this out of my own pocket, literally got some Zatu backstock. I had to pay about 1.5 times, probably even say close to double the price of this game when it hits retail to get a copy of this. So I have gone over and above what I should be paying for this, just so that I can get a review out before autumn, Christmas time when it is meant to come out on retail, and I'll get stuck with all the Essen stuff at that stage. So this is entirely off the cuff as a review. But I had to find out. I mean, cool, blimey. The shut up and sit down effect, it kind of grates me to a bit because, you know, they're the most popular board game channel out there. Fair enough. I don't personally like their style, that's just me. But the influence that they have, where literally they can just simply say a few words, they can just go, this game is amazing. Suddenly, as soon as they do that, everybody on the internet goes absolutely fanboy crazy. And then proceeds to do whatever they can to get and play whatever game it is. It's their influence, and they have this influence, fine. But I know to not just trust that sort of thing. I had to find out what this game was all about. Now, this one is done from the later games, and it's done by Mr. Cole Vella. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that right. It's a German surname. I'm just going to say Cole from this point on. But my history with this designer is kind of, well, it's somewhat sparse. Because honestly, the main games, signature games that this guy's known for is Root, Oath, Pax Pamir, and John Company. Those are like the 4 biggest games on his credit list. Now, I won't go near John Company to save my life, because everything about that game tells me I'm going to hate it. I have not played Oath. Oath looks too impractical to get played though. I've heard it's this mammoth game that's going to need the same group all the time to play it constantly, and that's not practical for me, so I haven't gone near it. I have played Pax Pamir. It's okay. Nothing amazing. I don't really care for the theme. I like the asymmetric sort of, like the win conditions that can change, that kind of thing. That's cool, and the card display's fine. But honestly, I think Pax Renaissance is a better game, so I don't really go for Pamir as much. It's probably my second favourite Pax game, though. But that's not saying much, because most of the other Pax games I don't like. And Root, I'm just kind of meh on. I mean, Root's okay, and I love the app. The app is fantastic, but you've got to teach 4 separate games to get it played, and it's just... that's annoying. Again, not practical, and not all the races are fun to play. I mean, the Vagabond just seems to just choose one side and do nothing. The cats are boring, the birds are okay, but a bit fiddly. Probably the Underground Movement, the Woodland People or something, that's probably the most fun race out of the base game, but... you've got to hope you get that faction. I don't know, this guy's games don't tend to work for me. But there's certainly a lot of mega fans of Root and Pax out there. So this one was certainly on the hype list for a lot of people before Shut Up and Sit Down mentioned it. But the second the review came out and said this was like their game of the year, bearing in mind that the person reviewing it is a major Cole fanboy, absolutely loves his games, everybody has gone nuts. So I have gone into it pretty much completely blind, other than the fact that it is made by Cole and that it has a pseudo trick-taking element. Other than that, I didn't really know anything else about its mechanics. I just had to go, right, I'll dive in. It was at the Games Expo, but it was like booked up for loads of time and I didn't really like the look of it, so I wasn't that desperate to get into it. But now I have to find out, is this a true game of the year? Or is this just another one of those instances where hype has gone out of control?
What's the matter, Colonel Sanders? Chicken?
Arcs is played over a series of rounds made up into 5 chapters. Now, the game can be won anywhere between 3 to 5 chapters, but it depends if players can reach a particular point threshold, otherwise the game just ends after 5 chapters. Each chapter is played out with a series of 6 rounds, typically 6 rounds rounds, where every player has 6 of these different trick cards in their hand, and these come in 4 suits numbered 1 to 7. Let's say we're going with a 4-player here, you reduce it slightly for less players, and each round a lead player will play a card for the lead card. This lead card will dictate the suit for this particular round, and each card has a series of actions that can be performed, a number of actions that you can do, a number of action points, shall we say, and potentially an ambition symbol. We'll get onto that in a minute. Then once they have concluded their actions with this particular card, the other players in clockwise order then choose to play a card from their hand based on what the lead card was. So they can either surpass, which is to play a card of the same suit that's a higher number, in which case they get to do all the actions like they did, or they can play a different suit face up. They'll only get 1 action, but they get to do it off the card that they want to do. Or they can just play any card face down and they'll get 1 action only, but they'll do it off the card that was the lead card. And this is how a typical round will play. On top of that, the person who played the lead card may declare an ambition. There are 5 different scoring ambitions that can take place for a round: Tycoon, Tyrant, Warlord, Keeper, and Empath. And the idea is that there are 3 scoring markers which will chop and change in value as the game goes on. And as soon as you declare an ambition, let's say I want to go for Tycoon, I need to have a bunch of these materials and fuel symbols in my display. Okay, cool. So we're going to go for that. And if I get first place, I'll get 5 points. Second place gets 3 points. 3 of these ambitions can be declared during a round, during a chapter. And once the chapter is done and all the cards have been played, you resolve these individual scoring elements and then rinse repeat for the next chapter. Draw 6 new cards and, clear off the ambitions. New scoring objectives could be set for each chapter. The actions themselves are fairly straightforward, and they do come in this relatively good sort of little guide booklet that everybody gets in front of them. But these can involve moving around the map, building new ships and buildings, collecting resources off planets that you have control over, and there are also guild cards along the side of the board which give you special powers and abilities. You can have actions to influence these by placing little agents on them and securing them in order to take the cards that have your agents on them. So there's a fair few actions that you can do, but what the crux of the game is all about is that you have these 6 cards in your hand and you have to adapt to what cards are being played, because this is very much a tactical game and not a strategic game. You will also occasionally get into fights with other players where you will basically see how many of your ships are in the combat, choose any number of different dice. Some are better at hitting damage but more risky, some are very safe, some attack buildings specifically. And the idea is that you will roll the dice as necessary, and in a specific order you'll resolve the symbols, and that's it. The defender doesn't get involved. It's pretty much roll and see what happens. The game carries on for up to 5 chapters, as I said, because there is a points threshold depending on player count. If you meet the threshold, the game will just end immediately. Otherwise, play through 5 chapters and see who's got the most points at that point.
Everybody got that?
That might have seemed like a bit of a basic overview, but honestly that's actually one of the plus points of this game. There isn't that many rules to it. If you have played similar games that involve a trick-taking mechanic, some of this will be familiar, although to call it trick-taking is a little bit misleading, I guess. It's a very pseudo form of trick-taking, but there are some similarities, like playing a card and it's better if you can follow the lead suit. But there's not a ton of rules. I mean, the rulebook is not particularly big, and you will be able to get started into a game relatively quickly, and there is a fairly decent, not brilliant, but fairly decent guide leaflet that everybody gets, which kind of takes them through the most important rules, like a summary of all the actions, how playing a chapter works in terms of playing these cards, and what the difference between surpass, copy, and pivot is, and how you score at the end of a chapter. These are very good little reference guides, although we will talk a little bit more about the rules a bit later on. But that being said, when I was learning this game before I was going to teach it, it didn't take me that long to get through the rules. This is probably one of, in terms of a game that can take as long as it does, it's not that rules intensive. There's not a huge amount you need to know, you just have to really understand how the card system works, and then everything else is kind of stuff we've seen before. The meat of this game revolves around these cards. So the idea that you've got 4 suits, different numbers, and different numbers of actions. So the higher the number, the less actions you get, and also the fact that you want specific cards to declare the ambitions, because you can only declare an ambition if the ambition symbol is on the bottom of the card. So there is that aspect, and you can only even do that when you're the lead player. So turn order, particularly going first, is of critical importance in this game. You can even discard cards to try and seize the initiative so that you're going first in a future turn. turn. It's very difficult to convince people to do that because you are effectively losing a turn to do it, but you should do it at some point because if you really critically need to go first, seizing the initiative is the best way to do it.
Second place? That's a fancy word for losing!
The meat is all about adapting to these cards, and we'll get on to some negatives for that a little bit later. But this is still a fun little mechanic. The idea that you have got these 6 cards and you must try to adapt to the hand that you've got. And you can pull off some, cool little combo turns every now and again. If you are going first, you're going to get the full fruits of your card. So it's like, well, great, I'll play my 4 administration here. Well, that's giving me free actions. I can do these. I can pull off some really cool thing here where I can influence a bunch of cards or tax some of my planets, get a bunch of these resources in. That is exactly what I need. But even if you're reacting to what someone else has done, you've got options because you might be able to surpass them, in which case, great. But do you want to? Maybe you really desperately wanted to do a battle this turn. Well, I need the aggression card to do that, but he's just played a construction. Well, I could play an aggression card and then just do 1 battle action. Maybe that's worth doing. Or should I play my construction card that surpasses? It could possibly take the initiative next round and then build stuff, but I was kind of hoping to battle now, and if I don't do it now, he's going to do it, and it's going to hurt. So there's a lot of cool aspects to do with timing and sort of tactical response with this game. This is by no means a strategy game. In fact, to call it a strategy game would be misleading in every shape of the word, because you cannot plan in this game to save your life. You've got to adapt to what the cards do. And again, we'll get onto the limitations of that later, but this is not a game where you go, right, this round I'm going to do this. Right, this game I'm going to be the warlord all the time and it's going to be like nothing but killing things. You can't. The scoring conditions change every chapter, another aspect I quite like, because I do like it when you've got variable scoring throughout the game. And the cards you get are going to be different, and the guild cards you get are going to be different, so you cannot sit there with a game plan and expect it to work out.
I like your plan, except it sucks, so let me do the plan, and that way it might be really good.
You are going to have to be flexible, and for the most part I tend to like tactical games. Not always, there are some exceptions to the rule, but I tend to gravitate more towards the games where you do have to react or adapt to various situations, but it depends on how well you can do that or how well the game lets you do that. More on that a bit later. The guild cards lend to a little bit of freshness for each game. There's not a huge amount of them, and I do wish there were more because there is a bit of a rinse-repeat with some of these cards. Like, there might be 6 union cards and they all do the same thing, it's just which resource does it work with. But the idea with these is that they do lend themselves to, some cool moments where you can go, right, I could really do with something to boost me there. It's like, ooh, that card's pretty sweet. Yeah, if I get that, that's got a cool power on it, I might be able to use it. Maybe I should try and get that ASAP before I start taxing these planets. And, these only come out 4 at a time, and the deck is a little bit bigger than this. This isn't all of them, but there still isn't that many of them in the game. But these just add like a cool, almost like an opportunity moment. You see these come out, somebody buys a card, you're like, I wasn't interested, what's this new one? It's like, ooh, I quite like the sound of that one, I'll grab that. And once you do grab a few of these each, you are starting to differentiate yourself a little bit more. There are some leaders and lore cards that you can use to give everybody a little bit of player asymmetry. I don't think it's a big problem to make it into your first game. They recommend you don't, but honestly, these aren't that complicated, so I would throw some of these base ones in there. There is an expansion pack called Leaders and Laws to add even more asymmetry, although that to me seems like a bit of a cash grab because it only adds like 22 cards, and it's literally a stretch goal stripped out of the Kickstarter to sell separately. Which seems a little bit, I'm not a fan of that. I mean, it's literally 22 cards that you've got to sell me for £15+. Just put it in the base game and add a little bit more value to it,
Cash grab!
Art is always subjective in the eye of the beholder. Now, this particular art style has been used in a few of later games already. I think it works okay in Fort, but I wasn't the biggest fan of it in Root, and I'm not sure it works here either, and the artwork is very much of a mismatch. I mean, on the one hand, you've got their typical artwork for a decent looking alien character on a character card. Okay, fine. I don't think it's stellar artwork, but to each their own. But then when you look at these guild cards, you've got artwork on some of them, and then on a few of these Vox cards, you've just got basically a kid's hand drawing, from a sketchbook or something. And it's like, what, you ran out of budget and you couldn't afford artwork for these ones? What's the point? We can see it's a different type of card at the bottom, and frankly, they don't function that much differently from the other ones. So it's like, could you have not afforded art for these? Why is it all hand drawn? The map itself is also relatively clear to see where everything is, so it's a easy to follow map, but it's not that particularly inspiring either. I mean, the map is fairly tedious and boring. There's just basically a circle of sectors, each one just has a different type of resource planet on it, and a few gates in the middle that allow you to kind of get to one side of the board a little bit quicker. But that's kind of all there is to the map. I mean, you compare it to something like Empires of the Void, or even like some of the other games where the map builds as you go along. This is just set in stone, but some of the areas are cornered off and sectioned off entirely in 3 and 2 player games, which A, looks a bit weird when you set it up, but also just makes a fairly uninspiring map look even worse. Also, everybody complains about some of the graphic design parts of this, which is mainly the planets themselves. If you are colorblind, you are going to have to rely on, the symbols to get you for the resources. But the resource symbol for each of these planets is really small, and in some cases really hidden. I mean, the amount of times you look at a planet and can't quite tell it's a weapon resource planet because the rocket ship that they use blends so much into the drawing of the planet that you can barely see it. So it would have been nice if they just made those a little bit bigger or just something. I mean, you've got a lot of wasted space here. A lot of wasted dead space that's not doing anything. You could have enlarged the symbol just a little bit to make it a bit clearer to see.
Why is it still blurry?
That's all the resolution we have. Making it bigger doesn't make it clearer.
The game is also very interactive with other players. This is generally a good thing because it means that it's not just a solitaire game. You've got to get in each other's faces. You've got to think about what they're going to do, whether they're going to play a certain type of card, whether they're going to react to what you're doing. Are they trying to steal a card you're doing? Have they got a base that you might be able to go after that's undefended? There's definitely, no solitaire nature of this game, though that does come with a bit of a caveat. This is also one of the most brutal games you are going to play in a while. You are constantly in each other's faces, stealing cards off people, grabbing cards before they can, even if they've spent several turns trying to claim it themselves. Physically going up and blowing up their ships and bases. You cannot play this easily. I mean, I have done, but you cannot play it easily as a turtle with, a pacifist attitude, because it's not going to be great when people start coming your way. You can certainly play relatively defensively, but at some point you are going to get into combat, and there may be an opportunity for you to do a sneaky raid, and you're going to want to take it. You can't just be entirely on the sidelines. But this game will put you in situations, whether because of luck of the draw, or what cards other people play as lead suits, or just the fact that you could be ganked on by loads of other players, and you could be in a situation where you're just not going to recover, or at least find it very difficult to recover. You've got a bunch of ships at the start of the game, but if these get blown up early, and you don't have construction cards, then good luck, good game. You're not going to have enough ships to defend yourself. People will just wail on you more. There is no real catch-up mechanic in this, at all. If somebody starts off well and keeps doing well, unless all the other players start ganking on him, then that player is going to continue to do well. There's not a huge amount you can do about it unless you get a specific guild card to say help you with it, or people pull their resources to do so. But that's not something I've seen in this game, and it's not something I don't think you could do very easily, given that there is no binding deals, there's no real cooperation in this game, and certainly it is fully competitive. So there is definitely an essence of a runaway leader issue, and certainly that if you're not comfortable with beatdowns and being on the back foot, particularly for a long game, then this game is not going to be for you.
God's sake, why is it we can't learn to live together? You're right, Norman.
Some flaws I'm going to mention a little bit later are compounded by this one. The back says 60 to 120 minutes. That is wishful thinking. This game, easily with 3 players, can easily surpass 2 hours, or certainly get onto 2.5. With 4 players, you're looking more closer to 3 hours, and for your first game, you might want to add on at least another 30 minutes to an hour just to get through your first game. And if you've got new players, it's going to slow the game down as well, because they've got to get used to how the tactics work. And it's not, as I said, it's not the most rules intensive game, but the problem that you have is that this game, being pretty much solely tactical and reactive in the way that it works, means that you can't plan your turn. So, you might have 6 cards in your hand. It's like, well, I would quite like to, do an aggression this turn, then maybe do my admin, and then do my mobilize. You can't. You've got to see what gets played as a lead card. It's like, I want to do battle this turn, and I want to do a lot of movement. Okay, what's the lead card? It's an admin. Okay, so I can only do 1 if I'm lucky. and that's, not exactly going to help. But, you are very much geared by what lead card gets played, what cards are in your hand, and how other players, perform their turns. I mean, you might have an idea that, all right, this turn I will tax these planets and all will be well. But by the time it gets round to your turn in turn order, people might have already ram-raided most of your stuff. It's like, oh, well, that's not that great anymore. I better think of something new to do. And this generates a lot of analysis paralysis. You cannot play this game quick, super fast turns or anything like that. You've got to think about your next move. You've got to have a plan B and a plan C. But the problem is that you don't know what your plan B and C is until the other turns have unfolded. So the downtime in this game can be quite high in terms of doing your turn. You're not really involved in anybody else's turn other than the fact that somebody might go, I'm attacking you, here's some dice, right, give me your negative stuff. You're certainly not interacting on a positive nature in anybody else's turn. So I could be waiting to play my card, and I'm sitting there going, all right, come on, get on with your turn, because the person before me has been screwed over by the lead card, and now has to think, oh, great, well, now what am I going to play? I was hoping you'd play a construction card, and it does lock up a little bit.
Well, we're waiting.
Now, this rulebook, I said that it wasn't a rules-intensive game and that you could probably get stuck into your first game relatively quickly. That is a plus. Kudos. But this is still not the best rulebook ever. It's laid out in a bit of a weird way. It starts off fine, a few core concepts and then playing a chapter and then standard actions. But where it then sort of drops the ball is that it gets into, other actions after you've already declared the end game, and it's like, well, hang on a minute, I kind of need to know what a prelude action is a lot earlier in the book, but for some reason it's miles at the end. It's like, why would you do that? And then there's some fine print bits which are, again, fairly important rules that are just put at the very end, a very tiny glossary at the other end, and an index on the back. And you might be thinking, well, that's not too bad, is it? Well, put it this way. Go on Board Game Geek. There are over 300 threads in the rules section for this game. 300. I am not joking. It is there. You can go see it. This game does generate a lot of FAQ moments. Their interactions with some of these cards are not laid out well enough in the book. And obviously I didn't expect them to have a whole list of every single card and what it does, although to be fair, some games do that. So if they can do it, you can do it as well. Go the extra mile. But the problem is that a lot of the common interactions with some of these cards just aren't mentioned in this book. And so or if they are mentioned, they're laid out in such a weird way that you'll easily miss it. It is still not really 100% clear from the book how these guild cards that have icons on them that say, oh yeah, you can keep this one at this time or play it, or you keep it at this score. And it's not 100% clear how they work. But then you've got lots of other interactions with the characters and the guild cards that, that are in this deck, and even some of the scoring conditions. It doesn't lend itself well to a smooth experience. The amount of times that we've had FAQ moments in the game, some of which I can get answered, some of which I'm still to this day not entirely certain how they work. The book mentions about when you ransack somebody's card in a raid to, grab a card that's got their agents on it, but it doesn't stipulate that 0 doesn't count. It says any number of their agents. Well, does that include 0? In which case, can I just pick a card that doesn't have it? I don't think you can, but it's not explained well enough in the book. There's no specific thing for it, and there's just a lot of these FAQ moments that just kept popping up. And if the rulebook was robust enough, then you wouldn't have 300 threads on Board Game Geek. So yes, you'll be able to get started relatively quick, but you're going to be asking a lot of questions. And I do mean a lot.
I don't get it.
Right, let's get on to the big one. And this is where there's a lot of contention between the fans of this game and the non-fans. There is certainly big arguments to be had. The luck factor of this game, the randomness factor, is one that is heavily contested among people who have played this, whether good or bad. Now, let's throw a little bit of context here. In terms of randomness, a lot of it stems from a few things. Firstly, the guild cards themselves. These guild cards come out randomly, and there is clearly some that are more powerful than others. I'm sorry, some of these are just basically solely here so that you can get an icon for a particular winning condition. Great. But some of these here are incredibly powerful cards, but also very swingy cards. The ability to, for example, to declare an ambition when you're not the lead player is insanely powerful. I have put that to serious good use. A Vox card that says when you take this, everybody has to provoke an outrage of your choice. Bear in mind that when you provoke outrage, which is usually when you kill a building, you have to basically say that I can't spend a resource for a prelude action for the entire game. And you also have to discard all cards and resources of that type from your display. If somebody is doing particularly well on Empath and has a bunch of Empath icons, to grab that card, particularly if you grab it pretty soon after it appears on the display, and suddenly clear out their entire board, that is not only extremely punishing and brutal, but again, it's not a balanced card. It's like severely swingy. But the main aspect is that people cry foul with regards to these trick cards. The fact that you get 6 of them at random. You don't have a face-up display of these cards, which I kind of wish there was. I would have kind of liked it maybe if there was a face-up display and you had an action where you could buy the card, so you could buy a specific card that you needed. I mean, that'd be pretty cool. But for the most part, you just get the 6 and that's it. You're gonna make do with it. And the argument is that there is always, never a good hand. There's only a bad hand. You got to do the best with it.
I beg to differ, sir.
Yes, okay, you've got to adapt to a hand, but there's clearly better hands than most, or certainly better suited hands than what you have currently for what it is you really need to do. I've had a bunch of my ships blown up, okay? I'm going to need some construction cards because they're the only ones that can build ships, okay? Otherwise my bases are undefended and I'm just going to get stuff stolen from me on a regular basis, right? Well, I just draw 6 cards here and I don't have any construction cards. What am I supposed to do about that? You can't do anything because you can only play a card of a different suit or copy the lead card. So you have to hope somebody plays a construction card for you to have any construction that round. And even then, you're only going to get 1 action to do it with, which might be build a single ship.
Whippy!
You've got 6 turns a chapter, and one of them is going to be to build a single ship. That doesn't feel fulfilling and or fun, nor is it going to solve your major problem. Another aspect is the ambitions. You've got 5 different ambitions here, although, to be honest, there's really only 3. You've got Captives, which is nicking agents of cards. You've got the Warlord, which is getting trophies in combat. And then the other 3 are just clones of each other. Get all of this particular icon. No difference between them. It's literally just pile up on an icon. So really, you've only got 3 different ambitions, not 5. A little bit of extra variety would have been nice. But let's say I'm doing really well as the fuel drinker character and I've got a bunch of fuel. I'm clearly suited to doing the Tycoon one. Well, we're starting a new chapter. I'm the lead player. Great. Let's declare Tycoon then. None of my cards have Tycoon on it. In fact, I've just literally on this one, I've got 2 relics, I've got 3 Warlord and 1 Empath. So I have to do one of those as my ambition. Nobody else is going to declare Tycoon because I've got all the stuff. So why would anybody in their bright mind be dumb enough to declare Tycoon? So I've got 1 thing that I'm good at, maybe 2, but I don't have a single card to allow me to actually do it. So a lot of this stuff I've got in front of me is wasted. Now, if I've got to adapt to something that I'm bad at, I am clearly in a worse position than somebody else who's like, well, I got a few of these relic tokens. Oh, look, there's a relic card. Yes, I'll just declare the relic ambition right now. Right, cool, we're going for that. I'm already in the lead for that. Happy days. They're in a better position than you are, and that was entirely down to card draw. Nothing else. There was nothing else to allow you to be in that situation other than just bad luck of the draw. But then also, you have the fact that a lot of your turn is dictated by what another player plays as their lead card. I could have a bunch of, low value cards with a bunch of actions on them. Well, great, I can do a lot of actions. The problem is, low numbers, you're not going to surpass any card because most cards are going to be of a, higher number unless somebody declares an ambition, but that's only rarities. But then also, just because I've got these cards that I might like doesn't mean that the cards that get played ahead of me are going to help. It's like, I really need somebody to play aggression or mobilization. Admin, construction. It's like, seriously, I need you to play other cards. I'm only getting this 1 action a turn. Now, you can argue that you should discard a card from your hand to grab the initiative. The problem is, that sacrifices an entire turn of the round. You only get 6 typically, so now I only have 5 if I have to do that. And you might be seizing the initiative literally for a single turn before it's nicked back off for you again. If you're really fortunate, you could have this for several turns, in which case you're laughing, if nobody takes it off you. But, you've got to be really certain that you want to discard a card to seize the initiative. The games I have played, maybe it's been seized by that method. Most I've seen it 3 times in a single game, and that was a one-off. I think most of the time I've only seen it happen once or twice, and I know a lot of the fans are going to cry out foul, saying, hang on, this should be happening like 3 or 4 times a chapter, what's going on? Well, it's not an easy thing to convince new players to do, and honestly, a lot of the times I'd rather just deal with the fact that I'm not necessarily going first. I mean, I've won more of the games than I've lost of this, but, some of that is also down to the fact that I've got more experience than some of the newer players that have been taught. But I don't find that I want to discard cards in my hand to seize the initiative as often as some people might make you want to believe. And it carries that slight problem that, some people will say this is completely random. And the fans will say this is not random, it is entirely tactical, there's no randomness. I am definitely more siding towards the random side, but more in the middle, closer to the middle. I think to call this game entirely random is a bit strong. It definitely has a high random element though, because you are drawing your 6 cards at the start at random, which is going to dictate a lot of your ability to do stuff in the round. Your turn for the round is going to dictate by what the lead card plays. You have no idea what they're going to play, so what do you do from that? The guild cards will come out at random, so you don't know which ones are going to help suit you. Are they going to help other players? But then on top of that, combat is dice rolling. So you might have spent a lot of time building up a nice armada. Now I've gone to your place. Now I'm going to lay waste to your people. Right, I'm going to roll a bunch of dice. I've got 4 or 5 dice here. Great. And you roll like a bunch of blanks on the blues, or you roll a ton of self-hits or interceptions on the red dice, which means you just get hurt first. Or maybe you're trying to raid and you want to nick some stuff. You roll and all you get is, I get to hit your building once, I get hurt and I get intercepted. You can have combats fizzle completely, and given that you only have 6 turns on average a chapter, to have entire 2 or 3 turns potentially wasted, like the setup and the execution, it hurts. It just adds to that brutal factor. And you have some control over what you're going to do in terms of, right, well, I can choose which card I play, but in terms of having interesting things to do or meaningful things to do, that, on the other hand, leads more towards the random element.
Wait, my cheating unit malfunctioned!
Arcs is going to be one of the most talked about games in the gaming industry for at least the rest of this year. We've had the most influential channel talk about how this is Game of the Year. And if you go on Board Game Geek and look at the other reviews that there are, there's certainly a mix of love it and don't like it, but there's a lot of reviews, if you can call them reviews, where they're not really telling you what the game is like. They're trying to compare it to things like skateboard, real-time strategy games, and I don't know, custard for all I know. It's like there's some really weird creative pieces on there. They're interesting reads, by all means, give them a whirl, but they're not really reviews. And it's like, can you tell me what the game's like to play, what its mechanics are like, how long it takes? Or are you going to be talking about skateboards? I don't know, it's kind of weird. But for me, this one is definitely a little bit of a mixed bag, and I'm not getting Game of the Year vibes in any way, shape, or form. That being said, I can understand why some people would still really like this. I mean, this definitely feels like a game that is made for the Cole fans. If you are a fan of Cole's games, Root, Oath, Pax Mimir, John Company, if those games sing to you, then by all means jump into this, because I think you're actually going to have a pretty good time with it. And I've had some fun with this. It's not like, I don't hate this game. I've had some fun times with it. But there are definitely some bits that really hinder the enjoyment, particularly for how long the game is. But it's definitely going to be an argument between one side who love it and one side who hate it, because the people who do love this are very vocal about it. You see it on Facebook all the time. But really, this game is meant for 2 types of people. 1, the Cole fans, or 2, people who like long, brutal, punishing games with high interaction. You want to get in people's faces and mess them over and watch them squeal, then by all means this game's for you. And if you like Cole's other games, this game's also for you. If you don't fit into one of those 2 categories though, I strongly urge you to stay away from this game because you are not going to enjoy it. I definitely kind of more somewhere in the middle. You know, I like some aspects. I like the little bit of asymmetry you get, although I wish there was more. I do like that the scoring conditions change each chapter, but again, I wish they were more interesting. You've only really got 3 different ones, you know, even though there are 5. I do kind of like the way this card mechanic works, but I do wish I had more control over what cards I had and some more control over what I could do if the cards that get played as a lead card are not the ones that I want. Yes, you can discard cards, but discarding cards hurts, and if somebody doesn't have to do it, then they're in a better position than you. And some of these guild cards, I like the fact that these guild cards come out and give you some cool abilities, but there's definitely an unbalance issue with the fact that some of these cards are literally just taken for the icon, and some of these abilities are just downright broken in how you can really abuse them. You know, the rules, I like these little guides that you get. These guides are cool, but then the rule book, as much as it's not that rules intensive, still leads itself to such a ton of FAQ moments that it just makes for a very clunky experience. On top of the fact of it being like 2.5 to 3 hours plus long, the fact that the AP factor in this is very high because you've got to react to everything, so you can't plan anything out at all. So you're waiting for people to do their turns. This game is only, what? I mean, you always play this pretty much to chapter 5. You're never going to play this to chapter 3. It's not going to happen. Chapter 4, if people let you get away with murder, but, you know, to finish this in chapter 3, everybody would have to be deaf, dumb, and blind. This is really going to be a 5-chapter game, which means you're looking at a 2.5 to 3+ hour mark. It's a lengthy one for sure. So it's kind of a mixed bag for me. I got some enjoyment out of it, but I do think this has been overhyped by people who, you know, fair play, love this game, but are now trying to convince everybody that it is the game of the year and should be respected as such. I think this is a niche game that's going to appeal highly to a small group of people, and fair play, this is the game for you, but game of the year? No, there are some much better contenders. This one, RX gets a 5 out of 10 for me. It's an average game. I have some fun with it, and I have had some good times, some good little moments, some cool little card plays that have felt good. But if you're on the back foot in this game is not enjoyable in the slightest. And if you're not comfortable with the high random element and the fact that it's brutal and punishing, it's going to affect your enjoyment as well. And I got to admit, I don't really go for Cole's other games, and I like the card system, but I don't particularly like how brutal and punishing this game is. I don't tend to go for brutal or punishing games, but I'm willing to accept a little bit of brutality if you can recover well, and this game really does not let you recover. You know, if you get put on the back foot, you're going to be on the back foot for the rest of the game compared to somebody who isn't, and they're just going to walk away with it, really. It's got some good elements, but there's just quite a bit that gets in the way, and certainly for the cost I paid, it is not good value for money. It's adequate at best, even at the normal retail value. It's okay for me. I'm glad to have tried it, but I do stipulate that this is really for a small niche group of people, and if you fit in that group, get this game, you're gonna love it, but if you don't, stay away. So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then please thumb it up on YouTube and thumb it up on Board Game Geek when it goes live on the page. Don't forget to check out the other content I've done, Wild Gardens, Daybreak, quite a few reviews I've been putting out lately. By all means, check out those. Let me know your comments below, although please let me civil about this, because I know the ARC mega fans are going to dispute a lot of what's been said. I've listened to a lot of you already on other threads and other posts. I get what you're saying. This game is not for everybody, though, and it certainly probably just wasn't for me. But, you know, if you dispute some of the bits, then by all means let us know your thoughts, because this should be a nice, fair, impartial comment section. But again, keep it civil. You know, what do you think about Cole's other games? Pax Pamir, Oath, you know, Root and that? Are you mega fans of those? Are you actually somebody who doesn't like Cole's other games, but you like this one? In which case, I'd be very interested to know why that's the case, because that, I think, would be quite an interesting read. So take care, and remember, regardless of whether you're willing to get rid of half your hand to seize the initiative, it's still only a game. So bye for now.